The candle in the forest. In a snow-covered forest, a small cabin stood in solitude, surrounded by towering pines and a heavy stillness. Within it lived a young girl named Hildegard, along with her widowed mother and little brother. Life had been hard for them since her father passed away, leaving her mother to care for the family alone. The cabin, though humble, was warm and filled with love. As Christmas approached, the family's financial struggles weighed heavily on them. There would be no feast, no grand tree adorned with ornaments, and no gifts to exchange. Hildegard tried to remain cheerful, but in her heart, she longed for the magic of Christmas, the kind her father used to bring alive with his songs and stories. Outside, the snow fell silently, blanketing the forest in an icy stillness that mirrored her quiet sadness. On Christmas Eve, Hildegard's mother gave her a task. She handed her a simple but beautiful white candle and told her to place it in the window that evening and light it for those who might be lost in the dark. It was an old tradition, one her mother said that symbolized hope and hospitality for travelers in need. Hildegard carried the candle to the window, carefully placing it on the sill. She struck a match and lit the wick, watching as the soft golden glow filled the small room. It cast a warm light that seemed to push away the shadows. The flickering flame brought an unexpected sense of calm to Hildegard's heart, as if it carried a small promise of something good to come. Not long after the candle was lit, a faint sound came from the forest, a rustling, followed by the muffled crunch of snow underfoot. Hildegard froze, listening intently. Her mother rose from her chair, her face tense with worry. Visitors were rare in their remote corner of the woods, especially on a night as cold and silent as this. A few moments later, there was a knock at the door. Her mother hesitated, then opened it cautiously. Standing there in the cold was an old man, his coat threadbare and his face weathered. Beside him stood a young boy, no older than Hildegard's little brother, shivering from head to toe. They explained that they had seen the light in the window and had been drawn to it. They had been lost for hours, caught in the sudden snowstorm, and were desperate for warmth and shelter. Without hesitation, Hildegard's mother invited them inside. Though their home had little to offer, she gave the man a blanket and poured a cup of the broth she had been saving for her children. Hildegard sat with the boy, helping him warm his frozen hands by the fire. For a time, the cabin was filled with the soft hum of voices and the crackling of the flames. The loneliness that had weighed on them so heavily seemed to melt away in the presence of their unexpected guests. As the hours of the night passed, the storm outside grew fiercer, but inside the cabin, the atmosphere was peaceful. The visitors shared their story. The old man was a traveling carpenter, and the boy was his grandson. They had been on their way to a nearby village when the snowstorm had caught them by surprise. Without the light of the candle, they might never have found the cabin. Hildegard watched her mother with awe. Though they had so little, she gave freely and without hesitation. The man, moved by her kindness, reached into his tattered bag and pulled out a small wooden carving, a figure of an angel with outstretched wings. He offered it as thanks, explaining that he had carved it himself. Her mother accepted the gift with tears in her eyes. It was the first time in months that their small cabin felt touched by the spirit of Christmas. Hildegard stared at the angel, its smooth wood gleaming in the firelight, and felt a warmth in her heart that no material gift could ever bring. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving the forest sparkling under a clear blue sky. The old man and his grandson prepared to leave, grateful for the kindness they had received. Before they departed, the man turned to Hildegard, his eyes warm with gratitude. He reminded her that the light of the candle had saved them and encouraged her never to underestimate the power of even the smallest flame. As they disappeared into the snowy forest, Hildegard felt something shift inside her. The candle had done more than guide two travelers to safety. It had brought light and hope into their home, reminding them of the true meaning of Christmas. That evening, as they placed the wooden angel on their modest table, Hildegard and her family gave thanks for the unexpected joy that had visited their home. The candle in the forest had become more than just a symbol. It was a beacon of love, hope, and the power of giving, even when there was little to spare. The last straw. The Johnson family always loved the Christmas season, but this year felt different. The warmth and joy they usually shared had been overshadowed by the stresses of everyday life. Tom and Sarah, the parents, were exhausted from juggling demanding jobs, mounting bills, and raising 3 children: 12-year-old Emma, 9-year-old Ben, and 6-year-old Lily. Their home, once filled with laughter, now seemed weighed down by arguments, frustration, and impatience. As December began, Sarah decided to revive a tradition they had followed years ago when the children were younger. While unpacking the Christmas decorations, she came across a small wooden manger wrapped in tissue paper. It was simple but beautiful, carved by her father and gifted to her when she started her own family. The sight of it brought back memories of quieter, more peaceful holidays, and she decided to bring the tradition back into their lives. That evening, she placed the empty manger on the mantel, nestled among twinkling lights and garlands. The idea was simple. For every act of kindness performed during the holiday season, a piece of straw would be added to the manger. By Christmas Eve, the goal was to have it filled with enough straw to make a soft bed for baby Jesus. Sarah explained this to the family as a way to focus on what truly mattered: kindness, love, and the joy of giving. At first, the tradition was met with uncertainty. The children were used to bickering over toys, chores, and whose turn it was to pick the Christmas movie. Tom, though supportive, was often too tired from work to engage fully. Acts of kindness didn't come easily in those early days, and the manger remained nearly empty. Frustration and impatience seemed to get in the way of their good intentions. But slowly, something began to shift. Emma, the oldest, started to help more around the house, even taking time to help her younger sister with her schoolwork. Ben surprised everyone by quietly shoveling snow for their elderly neighbor after a storm. He came back into the house cold and tired, but there was a quiet pride in his expression. Sarah began to bake extra cookies to deliver to a nearby shelter, and Tom started tackling chores without being asked, hoping to lighten her load. These small efforts added pieces of straw to the manger, and with each one, the atmosphere in the house began to soften. The children started to notice how good it felt to be kind. One day, Emma gave up her favorite blanket so Lily could use it for a fort. Ben donated a few of his prized toys to a local toy drive, an act that seemed small, but felt monumental to him. Even Lily, though young, made an effort to help in her own way, offering hugs when she saw someone upset or drawing cheerful pictures for her siblings. Each act, no matter how small, brought the family closer together. As the days passed, the manger began to fill, not just with straw, but with a renewed sense of togetherness. Arguments became less frequent, and the sound of laughter started to echo through the house again. On snowy afternoons, the children played outside, building snowmen and clearing the driveway together. Inside, Sarah and Tom found time to sit by the fire, sipping cocoa and reflecting on how their family was beginning to change. By Christmas Eve, the manger was nearly full. That evening, the family gathered around it, the soft glow of the Christmas tree lights illuminating their faces. The sight of the nearly overflowing straw was a testament to their efforts over the past weeks. They reflected quietly on the journey, their hearts full of gratitude. Each piece of straw represented not only an act of kindness, but also a moment of growth, of connection, and of love. On Christmas morning, the Johnsons gathered once more around the now-filled manger. Tom gently placed a small figurine of baby Jesus on top of the straw, completing the scene. The simple, quiet act felt sacred, a culmination of all the love and thoughtfulness they had poured into the season. As they stood together, a profound sense of peace and fulfillment settled over the family. The tradition became a cherished part of every Christmas after that. It wasn't just about the physical act of adding straw to the manger. It was about finding joy in giving, being thoughtful, and remembering that even the smallest gestures could create something beautiful. And as the years passed, the Johnson family carried the lesson of that simple wooden manger in their hearts. The greatest gifts of Christmas are the ones that come from love. The Christmas Secret. It was the first Christmas Eve that Emily would spend without her father. The small apartment felt colder and emptier than ever, even though the snow had stopped falling and the world outside glistened under the moonlight. Her mother was working late at the diner, and Emily was left alone with a quiet house and an aching heart. The tree in the corner was small and undecorated, save for a single paper star she had made when she was little. Her fingers traced its edges as memories of happier Christmases flooded back. Emily sat by the frosted window, staring out at the glowing lights of the other homes in the neighborhood. She envied the laughter and warmth she imagined behind those glowing windows. Christmas had always been a time of magic and togetherness, but now it felt like just another reminder of what she had lost. She wrapped herself in a blanket and tried not to cry. Somewhere deep inside, she wondered if Christmas still held any meaning for her. As she gazed outside, Emily noticed a shadowy figure trudging through the snow. The man was bundled in a long coat and scarf, carrying what looked like a large sack over his shoulder. He paused near her building, glancing up at her window. Emily's heart quickened. Who would be out on a night like this? She watched as the man walked slowly down the street, stopping at each doorstep to leave something before disappearing around the corner. Curiosity tugged at her. Pulling on her coat and boots, she slipped outside, the cold biting her cheeks. The snow crunched softly beneath her feet as she followed the faint footprints the man had left behind. Her breath came in frosty puffs as she hurried to catch up. Finally, she spotted him near a dimly lit alley, placing something at the entrance before stepping back. He stood there for a moment, as if lost in thought, before turning and heading deeper into the shadows. Emily froze, unsure whether to follow. When she reached the alley, she found a small bundle wrapped in cloth. Inside were a few simple gifts: an apple, a knitted scarf, and a small tin of cookies. Her heart ached at the thoughtfulness of it. Someone had gone to great lengths to make sure others felt remembered, even in this quiet, hidden way. Emily couldn't shake the encounter. The man seemed familiar, though she couldn't place why. The next day, she asked around the neighborhood, describing the man she had seen. Most people shook their heads, though one elderly woman, Mrs. Harper, seemed to know something. She leaned in close, her voice low and conspiratorial as she shared the story. Years ago, Mrs. Harper said, there was a man named Mr. Nicholas who lived alone on the edge of town. He didn't have much, but every Christmas Eve, he would leave gifts for families who had even less than he did. No one ever caught him in the act, but they always knew it was him. He disappeared one winter, and some said he moved away, while others thought he had passed on. Emily felt a shiver that wasn't from the cold. Could the man she saw be the same Mr. Nicholas? Or perhaps someone continuing his tradition? The thought filled her with both wonder and longing. That evening, she looked again at the small bundle she had found and felt an unfamiliar warmth spreading through her chest. Someone out there still believed in the magic of Christmas. Maybe, she thought, she could too. Emily's mind raced as she thought about what she could do. She didn't have much, but she had her hands, her time, and a deep desire to give back. She spent the next day gathering what she could. A few small trinkets, some cookies her mother had brought home from work, and little notes she wrote herself, wishing strangers a Merry Christmas. She decorated each note with stars, drawing from the one on her tree, and packed them carefully into makeshift bundles. That evening, as the town settled into quiet slumber, Emily bundled up and slipped out into the cold. Her heart pounded with both nervousness and excitement as she walked from house to house, leaving her little bundles at doorsteps, just as the man she had seen. With each bundle she left behind, she felt lighter, the loneliness in her heart replaced with something she couldn't quite name. It was as if the act of giving had reignited a small flame inside her, one she thought had been extinguished. When she returned home, she placed her last bundle on the doorstep of her own apartment building, knowing it would find its way to someone who needed it. As she closed the door, she looked at her small tree, now glowing with a few handmade ornaments she had added earlier that day. It no longer felt small or sad, it felt bright, alive, and full of meaning. Christmas morning dawned quietly, the world outside blanketed in snow. Emily woke to find her mother home early from work, smiling as she handed Emily a small package wrapped in plain paper. Inside was a book Emily had been wanting for months, a gift her mother had saved for, even through their struggles. Tears welled in Emily's eyes, not just for the gift itself, but for the love it represented. Later that day, as Emily walked through the neighborhood, she noticed something remarkable. Children were playing with small trinkets and toys, neighbors were chatting warmly, and the quiet buzz of joy seemed to fill the air. Some carried notes decorated with stars, their faces lit with wonder. Emily realized then that her small efforts had made a difference, however humble they might have been. That evening, as she sat by her tree with her mother and brother, Emily felt a deep sense of peace. The memory of the mysterious man stayed with her, though she never saw him again. She realized that the true secret of Christmas wasn't in gifts or decorations, but in the act of giving, of spreading kindness, love, and hope, even when you have little to give. The secret had transformed her Christmas and her heart, leaving her with a light that would shine for years to come.